The anti-cancer qualities of marijuana appear to have been known to the U.S. government for over 30 years. In a 1974-75 Medical College of Virginia study led by Dr. Albert Munson, they discovered that THC slowed the growth of 3 kinds of cancer: lung, breast, and virus-induced leukemia. The Virginia study was shut down, and all further cannabis tumor research was abandoned. Although cannabis smoke has been shown to have precancerous effects in animal tissue, countless studies have failed to find a link between cannabis smoking and cancer, and in fact have shown that heavy marijuana users have considerably fewer cancers than the general population.
Dr. Donald Tashkin is a very good researcher at UCLA. He is a pulmonologist. His research demonstrated that the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoked cannabis was less than the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoked nothing at all.
We actually succeeded in studying about 600 lung cancer cases, about 600 head and neck cancer cases, and the bottom line is we failed to find any positive association between marijuana, even heavy marijuana use, which we defined as more than 10 joint years. Even if you look at more than 60 joint years, a joint year is a joint a day times the number of joints smoked, we could not see an association. So I think it's really essentially a negative study. We failed to find any positive association with cancer.
Is it possible that the tar in smoked pot could be causing malignancies while the chemical constituents in pot are curing them at the same time? It was only in the 1960s that fat-soluble THC was isolated from pot plants and declared the substance that got us high.
The substances in the cannabis plant which are active are kind of fatty-like, lipid-like, and they're hard to work with. So it has been very hard for chemists to get a handle on these kind of substances. Therefore, it took until 1964 for Raphael Mechoulam and his colleague Adri to discover the active compound in the cannabis plant, which they called then delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or as we know it, THC.
The compound that we isolated, 1964, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, has been looked into in great depth. And indeed, for the next 20 years, people got to know a lot about the chemistry, a lot about the clinical effects, a lot about the biochemistry of THC. One thing was still unknown 20 years later. I mean, I'm speaking now of 1964 till the mid-80s. Nothing was known about the mechanism. How does THC act in the body?
Cannabis can affect memory and movement, but only temporarily. Though there have been reports of pot's negative effects on the heart and cardiovascular system, they are rare and not scientifically substantiated. Research has also shown that past claims of brain damage from cannabis fail to hold up under scientific scrutiny. All in all, cannabis is very low risk. The long history of the human use of cannabis also attests to its safety. Nearly 5,000 years without a single documented death.
A few different types of edibles right now.
You got the ice cream?
The ice cream's in, gelatos in.
Make sure I have the ice cream.
Medical marijuana dispensaries across America are now offering an impressive array of cannabis-enhanced foods, which makes it easier to over-medicate with marijuana edibles. But even so, they are never toxic or lethal, and the symptoms will disappear within a few hours.
Are made with more of an indica hybrid, and those go by dosage. The green label are single strength, the red are triple.
See, when I've eaten stuff before, it just kind of has made me tired. I wonder if it's
these you wouldn't need that much of.
You wouldn't need a whole one?
No way.
Have you tried those?
I have. I had one little nibble, and that was plenty.
Well, you can eat 4 cookies. You can eat 6 cookies. I mean, you're going to end up falling asleep. You can't OD from it. It's impossible. You're not going to die from it. That's not going to happen. I've tried.
For marijuana to prove fatal, you'd have to smoke 1,500 pounds within 15 minutes, and any resulting death would likely be from asphyxiation. Dozens of major studies have been published in the last few years that indicate that the chemicals in cannabis, in the lab and in animals, have a significant effect on fighting almost all major cancers, including brain, breast, prostate, lung, thyroid, colon, skin, pituitary, melanoma, and leukemia cancers. They do this by promoting the death of cancer cells that have forgotten how to die, as well as a reduction in their crucial blood supply, while leaving healthy cells untouched. But why, you may wonder, would cannabis have any effect on cancer? The answer can be explained in one word: endocannabinoids. Amazing as it sounds, we're all born with a form of cannabis already in our bodies. It's called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system, or ECS, influences multiple physiological processes. This intricate system modulates energy intake as well as nutrient transport, metabolism, and storage. A completely natural collection of compounds, endocannabinoids are our body's own form of marijuana and are involved in most of our cells and structures. They control a variety of functions in the nervous system, heart, reproductive, and immune systems. Endocannabinoid messengers help the cells communicate. Typically, they protect our good cells while killing the bad ones, like cancer cells. It was inevitable that eventually cannabis would meet its perfect partner: us. Whether you like it or not, each and every one of us is fundamentally wired to respond to cannabis.
Now, receptors are not built in our brain or anywhere in our body, of course, or animal bodies, because there is a plant out there that will produce a compound that acts on them. That just doesn't work that way. Receptors are found in our body because we produce compound that will activate those receptors. So obviously we thought that there should be endogenous compounds which act on those receptors. The fact that there is a plant compound, a tetrahydrocannabinol, a THC, which acts on those receptors, is just a quirk of nature.
After scientists discovered THC, they found that it could bind to specific receptors in the brain and the area around it, and that this interaction created a cascade of biological processes leading to the well-known high.
What does it feel like? It looks very enjoyable.
My God, it's fun. It was amazing. Amazing.
If you block the endocannabinoids artificially in mice, they tend to grow tumors, and they also get depressed. A few years ago, some brilliant entrepreneurs came up with the idea of blocking the endocannabinoids in our body to create a new diet drug. The theory being, if cannabis gives people the munchies, then blocking the endocannabinoids would make them lose their appetites. The drug they developed, Ramonabant, did indeed reduce appetite by blocking the endocannabinoid receptors. But data from clinical trials showed that Ramonabant users suffered depression, anxiety, insomnia, and aggressive impulses at twice the rate of subjects given a placebo.
Well, Sanofi-Aventis, the company that had developed and was marketing this agent, did not study people with a history of psychiatric illness or depression before they applied for approval. That was probably a mistake. The EMA did approve it, and the drug's been on the market in Europe for a year and a half by now. And I've sort of said, if there was any real problem with this that was more than just theoretical, we would know. Well, it turns out we do know. And they've suggested now that the risk for this agent outweighs the benefit.
In one study, there were 5 suicides among Ramonabant users because, as they discovered, endocannabinoids are also mood regulators with the capacity to make us feel euphoric or, when blocked, depressed. Ramonabant was finally withdrawn from the market in 2008. Researchers at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas reported that mice on rimonabant developed potentially cancerous polyps at a far higher rate than controls, confirming that endocannabinoids are not only mood regulators, but tumor regulators as well.
I consider that accumulation of THC give a lot of privilege to cannabis. For example, this plant very resistant to ultraviolet.
The same chemical that protects the plant may well have a preventative anti-cancer effect inside the human body, since THC and other cannabinoids are scavengers of disease-causing free radicals. What's especially fascinating is that while significant numbers of endocannabinoids are not normally found in breast and prostate cells, the homes for the two leading forms of cancer, it appears that large quantities show up only after normal cells begin to progress toward a state of uncontrolled growth, in a desperate attempt to restrain the tumorous invaders. The endocannabinoids already in our bodies did an efficient job for hundreds of thousands of years, working as tumor regulators, free radical scavengers, and anti-inflammatory agents. But then, once we entered the industrial age with all its pollution and chemical doctoring of food, the endocannabinoids became overwhelmed and couldn't keep up with the task of keeping us healthy and protected from toxins. Better public health helped us live longer. But unfortunately, human beings became inundated with the free radicals our bodies produced naturally by simply being alive, along with an unprecedented avalanche of carcinogens and contaminants, including pharmaceutical drugs. The endocannabinoids needed help. Enter cannabis. When marijuana is consumed and broken down into a collection of cannabinoid molecules, the THC and its sisters seek out and bind with the endocannabinoid receptors already inside us. Together, they give the body more ammunition against all of the diseases of modern times. Scientists are now experimenting to see which parts of the pot plant, including its cannabinoids and other biological compounds, might be the most effective against a variety of diseases, including diabetes and cancer. Seth Research Laboratories in California have recently demonstrated that in some tumors, cancer cells are killed by marijuana, while the other healthy cells are left untouched. Cells that stop moving and become still white dots are dead cancer cells. The ability of cannabinoids to kill bad cells while protecting healthy ones is particularly important when we're talking about brain cancer because of the so-called blood-brain barrier. The brain has to be sheltered from outside influences that might hitch a ride on the bloodstream and cause havoc. What is exciting and unique about cannabinoids is that they can pass through the blood-brain barrier because of their slippery, fat-loving nature. Cannabinoids get right into the brain's cancer cells by moving easily through the cell's membranes, which are also composed of lipids. The evidence is piling up in mice-infested labs that the endocannabinoid system, when stimulated by cannabinoids, has an anti-tumor effect and can instruct cancer cells to commit suicide.
This was done by Manuel Guzman's group within the past less than 10 years, and what they showed there was that originally that THC, when injected into a brain tumor in mice and rats, a significant number of those animals the tumor would regress and disappear, so that you actually had survival of rats that would otherwise die. And they examined all the surrounding nerve tissue, and that was all fine, because remember, once again, cannabinoids protect nerves.
Dr. Manuel Guzman is a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology in Madrid, Spain, and is known for his groundbreaking studies on medical cannabis.
Hemos observado que los cannabinoides tienen un efecto inductor de la muerte de las células tumorales, un efecto inhibidor de lo que es el crecimiento, la multiplicación de las células tumorales. Lo que hacen es disminuir el crecimiento de los tumores.
Research on this area is in its infancy, and that is because the United States government has discouraged that kind of research both in the United States and elsewhere.
There are 4 cannabinoid compounds that are of the most interest to scientists doing medical research: Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, is the principal psychoactive ingredient that creates euphoria in the smoker. THC exerts a wide spectrum of biological effects by mimicking the body's own natural endocannabinoids.
Probably one of the most fascinating cases is a gentleman with the glioblastoma multiforme brain tumor. Very deadly tumor. This tumor, from diagnosis, untreated, the average survival is just 3 months. Fully treated with radiation, surgery, and chemotherapy is about 12 months. So this gentleman is a middle-aged man who began using cannabis at the time of his diagnosis. He's been very consistent in using cannabis on a daily, multiple-time daily basis, now for 7 years without any signs of recurrence.
Faced with this rapidly changing scenario, the Drug Enforcement Administration is trying to modify its official position to allow pharmaceutical companies to market THC without appearing to contradict all the negative information on marijuana they've been propagating for decades.
All available research has concluded that marijuana is dangerous to our health.
The DEA now recognizes the medical qualities of THC, while trying to shift the blame for the prohibition of marijuana to the possible damage caused by the smoke.
How about the pill form that's legalized already?
The pill form is legal for 2 or 3 things: nausea and vomiting of chemotherapy, AIDS wasting, and also for certain kinds of neuropathic pain.
The holy grail for the pharmaceutical industry, and really for the federal government too, is to find the next billion-dollar pharmaceutical, the next billion-dollar drug. And the pharmaceutical industry now knows that these drugs are going to be cannabinoids. They know that the medicinal qualities are there to cure all kinds of medical problems. But I can tell you that the whole plant is uniquely effective. I've yet to find a person in my practice who prefers the prescription pure THC over the natural plant. That just is unheard of in the patients.
Cannabidiol, also known as CBD, is a non-psychoactive component of cannabis that gives the sedative effect to the high experienced. Amongst its numerous functions, CBD has been shown to have anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects. It helps fight diabetes, bacterial infections, and malignant tumors. This compound is also a nerve protectant and has well-documented antipsychotic and anxiety-reducing effects.
The cannabis plant has been bred for decades to maximize the amount of THC. That gives the plant the strongest psychoactive effect for the least amount of product. Now, in doing this, we've bred the other cannabinoids out of the plant, or down to minuscule amounts. And each of those cannabinoids that has been bred down to minuscule amounts has its own medicinal quality or medicinal properties. So we've lost a lot of those other properties. Myself and a group of doctors have been asking growers to bring back CBD into the plant, because cannabidiol, along with some of these other minor cannabinoids such as cannabigerol and cannabichromene, have shown to have a lot of anti-cancer properties.
Tetrahydrocannabivarin, or THCV, has been found in significant amounts mostly in South African and some Thai strains of grass. High concentrations of THCV will make the high come on quicker, but last for less time. This chemical compound may eventually prove to be a useful treatment for type 2 diabetes. THCV has been shown to have a protective, preventative effect against malignant tumors. Cannabichromene, or CBC, is a low-level cannabinoid. Though little research has been done, scientists believe CBC may have an antidepressant effect, as well as the ability to reduce inflammation. CBC strongly inhibits tumor growth in leukemia and breast cancer. Cannabis is a natural substance and therefore can't be patented. Anyone with a green thumb can grow it, and so its production could be in the hands of the people, not the corporations that run a $200 billion a year cancer business. It may not be a coincidence that pharmaceutical companies are silently preparing for what could easily become a total revolution in the curing habits of the world's population. GW Pharmaceuticals, a company that specializes in the study and commercialization of cannabinoids, has already established a full-cycle facility in an undisclosed location in the south of England, where they oversee the cultivation of the plant right to the finished medical product.
Growing areas?
This facility grows 30 to 60,000 plants every year. Once the marijuana is ready for processing, it undergoes the same exact treatment for extraction and refinement that is forbidden to regular citizens around the world.
Amazingly, GW Pharmaceuticals, who is this company that has 6 greenhouses in a secret location in the south of England, and each greenhouse has a different strain of marijuana in it. Each greenhouse has 10,000 plants in it. Each of the plants is a clone of the other. So they've standardized this stuff. Now, their product was approved for sale in Canada for treatment of multiple sclerosis, the muscle spasm and the pain related to that.
And this is a spray.
This is an under-the-tongue spray. And the reason they went with the spray was they felt that they would have a hard time getting by the regulators if they had people smoke it.
In the United States, things are moving fast as well.
Breast cancer kills more than 41,000 American women every year. Researchers in the San Francisco lab are working to shrink that number, and they're doing it with an unusual weapon, marijuana, or at least a compound from it.
What we found is that this compound called cannabidiol was particularly effective at inhibiting aggressive breast cancers.
I have a lot of faith in pharmaceutical companies and their ability to make money. And I think that if you take a look at what's going on now, first off, you've got an awful lot of basic science that's going on in regards to cannabis and cannabinoids. And some of this research is being paid for by pharmaceutical companies.
We know that this compound extracted from cannabis is non-toxic in patients because it has already been used for different kind of disease.
The benefits may not stop there. Scientists say the cannabis compound may fight other aggressive cancers, including prostate cancer. The next step, animal studies, then clinical trials. So it may be several years before patients may benefit from a cannabis cancer fighter.
Cannabis contains 421 chemicals, more than 60 of which are cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a unique class of compounds not found anywhere else in nature. A colorful plant with antioxidant activity, cannabis is subject to few predators and has even been utilized as an insect repellent.
It's quite an amazing spectrum of compounds that are in that plant. And what's so unique and incredible about them is they are touching on this incredible system that pervades all of us and regulates everything from, I tell people, cradle to grave, because it's in mother's milk.
Another stress to which pot plants are subject results from their daily exposure to the radiation produced by ultraviolet sunlight. This has created certain unique defenses in cannabis. Faced with all these new discoveries, one is brought to question what stops marijuana from being legalized for medical use all across the country. And it's not only doctors calling for legalization.
I was opposed to the medical marijuana initiative because it created a morphodite. You've got marijuana that's legal and you've got marijuana that's illegal. And therefore you've got a built-in problem is how do you determine who's legal and who isn't? And of course, with it being illegal, it's a built-in government price support. So as long as it's illegal, there's going to be money in it. If it was decriminalized, you know, everybody could grow it in their backyard. Nobody'd go by ripping them off at gunpoint or any other thing because it wouldn't be worth anything.
We wouldn't have to worry about people that were illegally transporting marijuana. We would know. You would have a license from the state. We made contact with you coming down Highway 101, for example, with a trunk load of marijuana. If we were to stop you for a minor traffic violation and detect the odor of marijuana, you could simply produce credentials indicating that you have a right to do this, that you're sanctioned by the state to make this happen, or licensed by the state. I think it would be very, very beneficial to law enforcement.
We now find that marijuana fights cancer, and they've known about it for nigh on 40 years, which means that if you think back to all the friends and family who've croaked from cancer, and think about these monsters in government who knew that marijuana showed promise in curing cancer, we have one of the biggest genocides, second biggest genocide next to usury, in the history to be talking about. Study finds no cancer-marijuana connection. By Mark Kaufman, Washington Post, staff writer, Friday, May 26, 2003. The largest study of its kind has unexpectedly concluded that smoking marijuana, even regularly and heavily, does not lead to lung cancer. The new findings were against our expectations, said Donald Tashkin of the University of California at Los Angeles, a pulmonologist who studied marijuana for 30 years. Tashkin's group had hypothesized that marijuana would raise the risk of cancer on the basis of earlier human studies, lab studies of animals, and the fact that marijuana users inhale more deeply and generally hold the smoke in their lungs longer than tobacco smokers, exposing them to the dangerous chemicals for a longer time. In addition, Tashkin said previous studies found that marijuana tar has 50% higher concentrations of chemicals linked to cancer than tobacco cigarette tar. While no association between marijuana smoking and cancer was found, the study findings did find a 20-fold increase in lung cancer among people who smoke 2 or more packs a day. He says, we hypothesized that there would be a positive association between marijuana use and lung cancer, and that the association would be more positive with heavier use. He said, what we found instead was no association at all, and even a suggestion of some protective effect against cancer. Federal health and drug enforcement officials have widely used Tashkin's previous work on marijuana to make the case that the drug is dangerous. Tashkin said that while he still believes it's potentially harmful, its cancer-causing effects appear to be of less concern than previously thought. Actually, no concern.
There was the misconception that use of marijuana led to debauchery and physical violence. And for that reason, I guess the investigator, I guess we were probably more conservative than we are now, but that's hard to believe. So it was considered the way alcohol was considered back in the time of Prohibition. And so it was prohibited, all uses of marijuana, because it had been used medicinally as well as for recreationally. So all uses were declared illegal, and marijuana then was given the status of a Schedule I substance, which means a substance without any recognized, any demonstrable therapeutic effects, as opposed to cocaine, which was also declared illegal for recreational use, but it still had medicinal properties as a local anesthetic, for which it is used today, to this day. That's Schedule II. Marijuana was widely used in the 19th century for the treatment of asthma. And in the 1970s, we found that marijuana has a bronchodilator effect. It's because of the THC in marijuana. First of all, let's compare and contrast marijuana with the other, even more widely smoked substance in our society, tobacco. The tobacco was used more widely than any other smoked substance, and marijuana is second only to tobacco.
Lucy?
Yes, dear.
Give me a cigarette, will you, hon?
Don't say cigarettes, say Philip Morris.
Oh? Is there any other kind?
Not for you, there isn't. Nothing but the best for Mr. Ricardo.
Thank you. Lucy, you're so good to me.
You see how easy it is to keep a man happy? Why not give your husband a carton of Philip Morris cigarettes?
Smart move. He loved them for their mildness, their smoothness, and their wonderful good taste. And he'll love you, too, for thinking of him.
That's right. Good night, everybody. And don't forget, call for Philip Morris.
We know that if you analyze the contents of tobacco and marijuana, they're quite similar. The major difference is that tobacco contains nicotine, not found in marijuana, and marijuana contains THC and about 60 other THC-like substances called cannabinoids, not found in tobacco. But there are a lot of other particulates that are shared in common, and these include carcinogens, such as benzpyrene, the most potent of the carcinogens and considered to be responsible for a large percentage of human cancers. Benzpyrene is found in 50% higher concentration in marijuana smoke than in the smoke from a comparable quantity of tobacco. This has been shown by 3 separate groups of chemical investigators. So the expectation is that if you smoke marijuana enough and on a regular basis, that you would incur similar risks to smoking tobacco. So what are the major health risks for tobacco? Emphysema, which I prefer to call chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's the new term. It consists of chronic bronchitis and emphysema. But you could have significant impairment in lung function without emphysema. It could just be due to airways disease, what we call small airways disease. But because we can't separate out the 2 components of COPD, emphysema, and the airways component, we lump them together. So that's COPD. So now COPD is the 4th leading cause of death in the US and in the world, and will become the 3rd leading cause in 2020. So it's a very important disease. About 120,000 Americans die each year from COPD. Probably the best evidence for separating out, the best method for separating out a COPD patient from someone else is to look at the rate of decline in lung function. I shouldn't say the best, it's probably the most informative. But it's more difficult to do because you have to make measurements every year for a number of years. And so you get a slope of the rate of loss of lung function over time. We did that. We actually measured lung function every year in our marijuana smokers up to 8 years. And we found that the slope of the decline in lung function was almost identical in the marijuana-only smokers compared to the non-smokers, where it was accelerated in the tobacco smokers. So just one other piece of evidence that marijuana is not a risk factor for the development of COPD. I think I'm convinced of that. And the other major health consequence, pulmonary health consequence of tobacco, is lung cancer. Cancer is the 2nd most common cause of death in the US, and lung cancer is the most common form of cancer. And the major risk factor for lung cancer is tobacco smoking. About 160,000 Americans die each year of lung cancer. So the question that came to my mind and that of my colleagues was whether or not there was any evidence that marijuana would at least qualitatively share some of these health risks with those of tobacco. And that was the rationale for initiating our studies back in the 1980s. What is the evidence that marijuana smoking, habitual marijuana smoking, can lead to lung cancer? With respect to the development of lung cancer, we found no evidence of any increased risk of lung cancer occurrence in association with marijuana smoking alone. The marijuana smokers, if anything, had a reduced risk for developing lung cancer. Not a significantly reduced risk, but reduced less than a 1-fold, so that means reduced. Whereas the tobacco smokers had a markedly increased risk. If those who smoked more than 2 packs a day had a 20-fold increase in the risk. That's 2,000%. Those who smoked from 1 to 2 packs a day had an 8-fold risk. It's 800%. So that contrasts with no risk, no increased risk, or a slightly reduced risk with the marijuana smokers. THC actually has an anti-tumoral effect. And these are studies that were done both in experimental animals and in cell culture systems, and for different kinds of cancer. For lung cancer, breast cancer, thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, gliomas, brain cancer, that the development and growth, or the growth actually of the tumor is suppressed by THC, and metastases are also suppressed. So how can that be? Well, THC impairs protein synthesis, and it's what we call anti-mitogenic or anti-proliferative. You need, so tumor cells don't as readily proliferate in the presence of THC. They're also anti-angiogenic, so they interfere with the growth and development of new blood vessels that are necessary for metastatic spread. And they also are pro-apoptotic. What is apoptosis? Apoptosis is programmed cell death. So when cells age, there is a mechanism whereby the cells die. It's a non-necrotic death to die off the old cells, and we get rid of them before they have an opportunity to develop mutations that would lead to cancer. So enhancing apoptosis diminishes the risk of the cells becoming cancerous. So marijuana turns out, THC rather, turns out to be pro-apoptotic. So those appear to be the mechanisms that might account for these anti-tumoral effects of THC. We decided to do our own case control study, funding from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is a major funding agency for marijuana-related research. This was the largest study ever conducted on this subject. It was very well designed. We used the Los Angeles Tumor Registry to identify, rapidly ascertain all the cases of lung cancer and head and neck cancer that were diagnosed in the LA County system. And of course, by the time we got to some of them, they'd already died or were too sick, but we got to it over 60% of them who agreed to participate and were able to participate. And we administered this questionnaire, and then we matched them to controls, the same age, socioeconomic status, that lived in the same neighborhood, using an algorithm that USC developed for this purpose, so that we could match, we're comparing apples with apples. And then we administered this detailed questionnaire, the food frequency questions, occupational history, all kinds of things. We also did molecular, we got a buccal smear so we could look at the DNA, could we look at the genetics of lung cancer. So what we did was to recruit smokers, heavy smokers of marijuana, at least a joint a day for a week, and it ended up that the average smoker of marijuana whom we recruited smoked 3 joints a day for about 15 years. And we also required that they smoke that much for 5 years, but on the average they smoked 3 joints for 15 years. So that's about 45 to 50 joint years. A joint year is the number of joints smoked times the number of years smoked. Over the study population was, I think, between 35 and 59. I think 35 was a younger age group. Because we thought that they had to be teenagers in their early 20s at the time of at least in the marijuana epidemic, which was in the mid-60s. So prior to that time, very few people used marijuana, but after that time, it just mushroomed up to 1979, which represented actually the apex, the acme of use of marijuana in our society. So that's why we chose those age limits. And so what did we find? For any category of cannabis use, including heavy use we define as more than 10 joint years, but we looked at 20 joint years and 30 joint years. For every category of marijuana use, the ratio was less than 1, meaning reduced risk. It wasn't significantly reduced, but it was reduced. And the confidence intervals were not that wide, around the point estimate. So there was no evidence, and we controlled for all the known or putative factors, for socioeconomic status, concomitant, tobacco smoking, alcohol, etc. At the same time, when we did a similar analysis for the tobacco smokers, there was a huge effect of tobacco.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred. Okay? How's about taking a nap? Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend.
Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking.
Yeah, buddy, Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.